Welcome to Living the Fit Life podcast, episode 67. I'm your host, Chad Mueller, and today we are jumping into one of my favorite topics, nutrition. And of course, whenever we talk nutrition, always followed by my favorite foodie co-host, Michelle DeJong, joining us for the first time in season 3. How's it going, Michelle?
First time in season 3. I've been
Yes,
slacking.
we're
Good
only
to
a
be
few
back.
episodes in.
Yes, I'm always passionate and love to chat nutrition. So happy to be here.
Awesome. And then, of course, I think it hasn't been long, but I think episode 63, we had Cara Kasdorf from Blueprint Nutrition, and she's back again. Hi, Cara. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. We got a little morning recording this morning, and we're going to try something new. We're going to try a little shorter podcast, a little bit more of a quick hit, kind of like, impactful nutrition topics. And yeah, let's jump into some hot topics maybe and find out some more information. And I think we're going to learn a few things today. So I wanted to start off first and foremost. You posted something the other day about processed foods. Um, I wanted to get your take on that a bit more because I know that the word processed, well, the topic of processed foods is generally a negative thing, but we know a lot of people do it for a convenience perspective. But I wanted to get your take on processed foods. And then let's talk about that.
Yeah, so that's a pretty loaded question.
Yeah,
I was thinking
yeah.
about like, okay, what's a good concise answer to this? So I guess my post, first of all, was kind of aimed. So a lot of my clients are athletes or very active individuals, and a lot of them are very very health conscious, almost to the point of like being a little bit stressed out about it. And so my post was aimed at at kind of those people that sometimes feel like, I have to eat like super clean, like quote unquote, all the time, 100% of the time, and I can't let any processed foods into my diet, and kind of saying like, well, first of all, most of the foods we consume are processed, right? Like from almond milk to even like almonds and like things like that are processed to some extent. So there's different degrees of like processed foods. So just to say like I will never eat processed foods doesn't even really make sense. But then also to look at like, to not be so hard on yourself that you can never feel like you can never have anything that's a bit more processed, right? And also understanding how those foods can perhaps fit into a good plan that is sustainable, right? Because that is always the key is having a plan that's sustainable. And so, yeah, I think in terms of like, a diet that is full of like ultra processed foods, whether it's, like eating fast food a lot or, buying a lot of convenience foods. And if that makes up the bulk of your diet and the base of your diet, yeah, we know that that's not good, right? Like we want to move away from that. But on the other hand, I think some people can also go to the other extreme where it's like they're afraid to eat a cracker because it's processed, right? And it's like that stress and guilt and anxiety around food can also be unhealthy, right? So it's finding that balance of like, and it's different for everyone, but how can we get up primarily whole foods and less processed foods type of diet, but also understanding how some of these processed foods may fit into your diet and why that's actually okay.
I love that, Cara. I think it's so important. Consistency versus those one-offs or doing something for a specific athletic event is so important. Uh, it can add up day after day, but if it's here and there, then no biggie,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, and I think that is the biggest thing is the consistency, right? It's the boring stuff. Like nobody wants to hear
Yeah.
that because it's not like flashy and like exciting. But that's how you're going to see results, right? And being consistent and nothing is black and white. Like we live in that gray zone in the middle where like some days are really busy. So what are you going to do on those days that doesn't totally derail your goals and your eating and your nutrition and all of that stuff, right? And so it's finding strategies for that. And so I think like having a good understanding of nutrition and understanding how to use certain foods in different situations can actually be really helpful.
I think I'm going to have to listen to this podcast maybe as Maddie gets older because I'm very stickler. A lot of things are made from scratch, and then I end up spending, a lot of time, and the full night is, prepping a full dinner and then prepping the lunches for the next day. And like it's
Totally.
currently a lot of work. So I know as she gets busier, I'm going to have to probably take this into a little bit more consideration and be a little gentler on myself with adding in some
Yes. And
few, maybe more processed foods.
I think, and that's a great point, because I think having kids was like a huge turning point for me as well. Like, um, just, yeah, like it's like, do I want to spend my whole life making food? And even I would go to the grocery store and like look at the ingredient list of like, I don't know, cookies or granola bars and be like, well, I can make this a lot healthier myself if I just make it at home,
Hmm.
right? But it's like sometimes you need those things, right? Like, and so it's important to find that balance.
Yeah, for sure. Enjoyment in life, we need a little.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I when we were making the kids lunches, right, we put like a container of some fruit, a container of some vegetables. Then they have their main lunch, and there might be a few other sort of like maybe like a few other snacks. But then there's always like, well, does this feel like enough? And then it's like you might drop a granola bar in the bag, and I always wonder, like, man, it's like, because we always talked about like, getting food from the earth is like the most healthy food, and we try to talk about like processed food versus healthy food. But then it's like, you're right, like, do I send my kids to school with just fruits and vegetables and a few different things, maybe like a protein or something like that? But then it's like, that might not be enough, right? So then it's like, okay, always try to eat your processed foods last, and this whatever's in the package, eat that last. But it is a convenience thing that I think with kids especially, like, there's so much processed foods, it's really hard to give them a lot of food without jumping into the processed foods area.
Yeah. And I think too, just one last point on that is, and this is a whole another topic for probably another day, but with my kids, I found they were starting to like kind of put foods on a pedestal that they would see other kids have at school, right? Like they'd be like, well, so and so has this granola bar and, has this bear paws or whatever it is. And so sometimes it's also important to just like kind of normalize those foods. So it's not this like, oh, when I do have it, I'm going to eat like, the whole box of bear paws or whatever it is, right? So it can also actually help to develop a healthy relationship with food if you throw those things in once in a while and just kind of normalize it and neutralize it.
No, it's awesome. That's awesome.
Hmm.
It's a really important point. Sorry, Michelle, I wasn't sure if you're going to say something.
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry.
Is
I
there a
wanted
lag?
to, but no, it was just me.
I feel like I keep freezing a little bit. So,
No, I think it's my video freezes. My video does usually freeze.
okay.
So no worries, no worries.
No, I'm good.
Um, I wanted to chat about another topic. I've seen it on Instagram for whatever reason. It seems like it's a hot topic in nutrition. Not sure what started it. I think Chipotle was part of it. There was a few other things. There's a bunch of folks talking about seed oils and how seed oils are the death of nutrition and the thing that everyone must not eat. I'm assuming you have an opinion on this. Is this just another one of those hot topics that are sort of just in the circle of social media and just getting attention, or is there actually something to it that we should be learning and uh, diving more into?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, super hot topic. And yeah, definitely on, social media, you get all kinds of different opinions on it. And I think it's important to look at like, like anything in nutrition, it's very complex. And so to have someone say like seed oils are the root cause of all chronic disease is just like clearly like doesn't even make sense, right? Like that, like if that was the case, then we wouldn't have like that's the cure, right? That we don't have chronic disease. Obviously, it's not that simple, and especially when we look at dietary fats, there's a lot of research some conflicting. And that's, again, the thing with nutritional science, is that it's always evolving. There's always stuff coming out. When we look at any source of fat, whether it's seed oils or any kind of oils or animal-based fats or anything, it's always a combination of different types of fats, right? So the kind of main types of fats are monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, saturated fats, and trans fats. So this debate is kind of centered around these polyunsaturated fats. And the two main sources of polyunsaturated fats are omega-3 fats and omega-6 fats. And so I'm sure we've all heard health benefits around omega-3 fats. And then, some people claim that these omega-6 fats are more inflammatory and may kind of contribute to things like, different chronic diseases and insulin resistance and things like that. Some of the claims around seed oils are also that because of how they're processed, they're oxidized, and there's all this harmful stuff that comes out of that. But really, when we look at the research, so the research that shows that some of these polyunsaturated fats may be causing inflammation is all done in animal studies. So no human studies that have looked at the effect of polyunsaturated fats on inflammatory markers have shown that they increase inflammation in the body. So that's really important to know, right? So a lot of these people are talking about a theory or a rat study that is not applicable to humans at all, because how animals, process and utilize nutrients is completely different than humans. So no human studies have shown this harm. The other thing is that when you look at how some of these seed oils are processed, some of them do use a chemical solvent to extract the oil from the seed. But it's all like food grade chemicals. And when we actually consume the seed oils, there's none of those chemicals left in the seed oils. Or very, 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 very small amounts. They do heat it to extract the oils. So it may reduce some of the nutrient content, but it doesn't get hot enough to oxidize the oils. So that is just completely untrue. So anything that you're hearing from social media about seed oils causing all this inflammation and causing all this chronic disease is just not true. And there's no research to support that at all. And in fact, there's research to support that polyunsaturated fatty acids actually can be helpful for health and have health benefits. So there's no basis for the claim that seed oils are harmful or cause inflammation. And just like with anything, there's this link between, a lot of seed oils are used in processed foods. Okay, so if you eat a diet that's very high in super processed foods, you are more likely to have chronic diseases, right? So you can't just say that it's because of seed oils. That doesn't even make any sense. And if you choose a cold pressed seed oil, they don't even use chemicals to extract those seed oils. They just crush them or mill them. So if you're concerned about the chemicals, then choosing a cold pressed oil could be a good alternative. But yeah, there's not really any harm in consuming, and there may be benefit in consuming seed oils.
So I shouldn't get my nutrition advice from social media, is what you're saying.
No, exactly. It's so funny because you sent me a few of the posts that you were kind of as examples, and I was like, oh my goodness, oftentimes I don't even dive into that world because it's just so frustrating. And I can't even stand to look at those posts because they're just based on so much misinformation. And unfortunately, these people have millions of followers, and everyone is just kind of eating up everything that they're putting out there. And it can be very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine from your perspective, but the machine likes to promote the controversy for sure. Yeah. But thank you for that information, because
Yes.
that's definitely helpful, because it's one of those things where it's I guess going back to the processed food topic, right? We know eating, having food that, the whole terms you can't spell out, the terms you can't read off the label, having too much of those. But I like how you said about the processed foods, consistency and balance, and just making sure that you're, the 80-20 rule is really important. And I think having a little seed oil in one of the ingredients in something, I don't know what it would be in, isn't going to be like crazy harmful as long as you're focusing on the 80%. So I like how you it all kind of fits in together, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
If we were choosing an oil, Cara, what would yours be?
Well, I think I'm a big, proponent of like switching things up because there's many oils that have different benefits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of olive oil. There's a lot of
Okay.
research behind it. And there's a lot of like antioxidants and a lot of those monounsaturated fats, which is probably the one type of fat that we know is going to be most like one of the most beneficial ones.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's kind of my fave, but even things like using like a flaxseed oil and not in cooking, but in like a, salad dressing or something like quite high
Right.
in omega-3 fats, right? So that can be super beneficial too. Avocado oil is another one that I like because it has a higher smoke point. So if you're using it for cooking, that
Yeah.
can be good. But it's similar kind of in the fatty acid profile to olive oil. But I mean, switching it up is important because all these different oils do give us different nutrients. And so it can be helpful to just, have variety.
Yeah, I've never thought of, maybe once or twice I've, changed things up, but maybe it's because oil, when you go buy them, they're so big and they're just
It's a big
expensive,
chunk.
and you're like, I
Yeah,
only want to buy one.
I know.
So
But then once you look at like even like taste profile, right? So like in
yeah.
more like Asian inspired dishes using like a sesame oil, right? Or like
Mm-hmm.
that sort of stuff can actually be like it's like from a like satisfaction perspective is kind of nice to have that variety in terms of flavor profile and stuff. But then you also get the benefit of different types of nutrients.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
I like that. I think I can should do that.
yeah,
Change it up a little bit.
that's right.
There you go. I wanted to talk about another topic, and I think we talked about this last time, or we talked around this topic of pre-workout nutrition, pre-race nutrition. We talked about like types of carbohydrates to take in before a workout, even early in the morning or afternoon in the day. But I wanted to talk more specifically about like fasted workouts. Waking up, not really eating, just kind of getting into it, or doing something in the afternoon. I wanted to get your take on, because I think we talked about it briefly last time, but I'm not sure if we actually kind of focused on it. So I would like to see what your thoughts are about fasted workouts. And I mean, Michelle, please jump in too with your experience.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, it depends. Well, it doesn't really depend, but there are different types of workouts, right? And so we're looking at like what is it like more of a like aerobic workout or anaerobic or different things. Um, but I think, I haven't seen any convincing research that shows that fasted workouts are super beneficial. And so I think for most people, it still makes sense to have something to eat before a workout. And again, depends on the situation and the person and all of those sorts of things. But when we even look at body composition, fasted workouts don't actually show any benefit and may actually show things like a reduction in muscle mass and things like that. Um, so I don't really promote fasted workouts because I haven't seen anything that is convincing that they're going to be, providing any benefit.
I would agree. Same, especially for women. There's a lot of data coming out, especially over the last few years, that fasted workouts for women would be detrimental as well. So,
Totally. Yeah.
mhm. Okay. So, Kara, if we're having non-fasted workouts, two questions. What would be a great one for the early risers? And question two is for the people in the afternoon. Um, kind of like what sort of quick snack or something would be great, or how they should kind of manage that.
hmm So yeah, the early morning can be a tough one because it's, nobody wants to get up like hours before their workout. So it's usually like
Hmm.
a quick, like 10 or 15 minutes beforehand. Um, so that one, I usually recommend like something more carbohydrate based, because we know that that's going to be the fuel that we're utilizing in the workout. If you can get a bit of protein with that, then that's a bonus. But I know
Hmm.
if you're getting something quick, unless it's like a drink, like a protein drink of some sort, it can be hard to eat something first thing. But even like having some Greek yogurt and fruit, for example, like if you can get that in the morning before your workout, great.
Yeah.
If you can just get a banana, okay, that's also good, right? Like I always say, something is better than nothing. So just prioritize having something, whether that's yeah, like the fruit, or depending what kind of workout you're doing, but you could do something like a bar or something like that, or even a few, like a few bites of an energy bar, like an RX bar or something like that, just to get something in you. And especially if you're not used to having anything in the morning, it can be hard to start doing that. So start small, right? And be consistent and get your body used to it.
Hmm.
And then get back to, and then increase from there. Um, are we still, is Chad still here?
Yeah, he'll come on.
Okay. Okay. um, and then for the afternoon, like that one's a little bit easier because usually there's more time to digest and stuff like that. But I would recommend, like, if you can have, again, something with some carbs and some protein. So a lot of people will do an afternoon snack of like some Greek yogurt and fruit, or do, even depending how much time you have, but you could do some nuts and fruit or something like that, if you have a bit more time to let it digest and stuff like that.
Cool.
Mhm.
And when we talk about those sources like carbohydrates and protein, um, can you chat just quickly about the reasons why you're not mentioning fat so much or vegetables so much in and around that time period?
Totally. Yeah. So, um, fat is really slow to digest. And so, when you're looking at a pre workout meal or snack, obviously you want something that's going to get into your system a little faster. Um, Fat can also, like, it really like delays gastric emptying in terms of some of the enzymes and stuff that are secreted. So, you can feel really full, right? Which we all know, right? We have a high fat meal
Hmm.
and like we feel pretty full afterwards. And so if you're going into a workout like that, it may not feel the best digestively. Um, and so that's why kind of sticking to like lower fat choices can be helpful. And then fiber is the same. Fiber slows down digestion, which is usually a good thing. It helps us keep us full longer, which is what we want. And same with fat, right? Like it's normally good to include
Hmm.
fiber and fat. But before a workout, that may cause some issues, and so it can cause some stomach upset, and just kind of also delay the other nutrients that you're consuming, like the carbohydrates and protein, kind of delays that from getting into your system for your workout. So it's better to choose less fiber, less fat, more carbs, more protein if you're looking at
Yeah,
kind of the 1 to 2 hours before a workout.
love it. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. Thank you. Chad, we lost you there for a sec, but
I'm back.
we were rocking,
Yeah,
rocking and
awesome.
rolling.
You guys got it.
Okay, I think that's great on fasted workouts. Another hot topic, caffeine and sort of any other stimulants. I definitely grew up no coffee, no caffeine type of person. And I currently maybe have like a few green teas here and there. So that's my total consumption of caffeine. And I would say Adam just started drinking coffee maybe around 30. So he also didn't have too much. Um, Now I think he's making up, for lost time. Uh,
He's realizing
so
how
he's,
amazing it is.
yeah, exactly. He's like very pro caffeine, and I'm kind of the opposite. I don't know how my gut would do with it and that sort of thing. Maybe it needs to be trained a lot. Um, what are your thoughts with caffeine in general, and then caffeine as a helpful tool for workout performance?
Mhm. So caffeine in general, and also specific to workouts, really varies on the individual. So there are responders and non-responders to caffeine. So there are some people that, can have a cup of coffee before bed and like they're fine and they can have a good night's sleep, right? And so they are not really affected by that caffeine at all, or they don't seem to be. Whereas other people cannot have caffeine past like 10 a.m. Otherwise, they're like up all night, right? So,
I think that's Chad.
yeah. So
Yep.
you can definitely, have a very individualized response based on genetics and things. So it's hard to kind of give like a, yes, everyone should be drinking or shouldn't be drinking coffee, or, I mean, that's one source of caffeine, taking any source of caffeine, because it is so individualized in
That's so
general.
interesting.
Yeah. And so you do have to
Mhm.
kind of figure out, again, what works best for you. In general, kind of the general recommendations are to consume no more than about 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine per day. Um, and so that would be about 3-ish cups of coffee, like 8-ounce, like 250 ml cups of
Yeah.
coffee, not like my giant mug that I have here, which is probably 2 cups in there. So that's kind of just in general, but then specific to performance, we know caffeine is one of the most researched performance enhancing supplements. We do know it does have a benefit to performance, both in terms of like strength based exercise and aerobic endurance exercise. So there can be benefit to that. But again, everyone's different. Some people are responders, some people are non-responders, right? So some people will take caffeine before a workout and be like, whoa, that felt amazing. I felt so much better. And other people will be like, didn't notice any difference. And so you have to figure out like if you're not noticing a difference, like it doesn't mean you need more. It doesn't mean like, it just means it's not having that impact on you. And it can also, like if someone's really sensitive to it, they can feel anxiety, they can feel increased heart rate, they can feel like some of those digestive issues happening from caffeine. So you do want to be, aware of those negative aspects to caffeine supplementation as well. And you can take caffeine as a supplement, or you can take it just as a cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is. A lot of like sports nutrition products like gels and drinks and things like that will have caffeine added to them as well. So that's important to look at when you're purchasing those products to see like, is this something that's going to be that I want, right? And how much do I want and all of that kind of stuff. Or even like pre-workout supplements is one that I see a lot of people taking. And like the main active ingredient, there's lots of things in there. But one of the main active ingredients is the caffeine, right? Like that's the thing that's going to give you that little like boost of energy. And then there's other things in there too, but oftentimes in smaller amounts. And, it doesn't even really make a huge difference in terms of like how much you actually need. But that's a whole different topic. But caffeine is definitely something that is kind of one of the main, components in those pre-workout supplements. So there is benefit. The dose is usually about 1 to 3 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight, taken about 60 minutes before a workout. So it's not huge, right? It doesn't have to be even a full cup of coffee, right? Like, or that equivalent. So it can be, a small amount. And again, like just because you're not feeling any effects doesn't mean that you want to take more. So there's not going to be, if you don't feel anything when you're taking, 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, don't bump it up to 6. So yeah, lots to kind of consider there with caffeine, but there is definitely, good research behind it in terms of a performance benefit.
Cool.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah.
I had two questions. Well, let's talk about one. I'm mostly, so I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine. I love coffee, so I drink decaf, and I'm good with that. All the decaf haters. But if I do get caffeine, I can feel it. My heart rate, my anxiety, like I can feel it like right away. I have tested a little bit of caffeine for workouts, and it doesn't seem to affect me the same way as if I was just sitting on a computer and doing caffeine and kind of just like sitting here staring at a screen. All of a sudden my heart's like, oh my God, pounding in my chest. I feel like working out actually helps, I guess, use the caffeine, I guess, if you could say. It's kind of like how I feel. But I wanted to ask you about like the volume, because the energy drinks and the amount of caffeine in the energy drinks for the younger generation is like, to me, like crazy. I was on a vacation and someone handed me like a Rain, which is like a lower amount of caffeine, and I had one day, and then I had one the other day, and I didn't really think too much about it. And then I realized, like, oh my god, like I'm acting this way because of this caffeine. Is crazy. Like, if you're going over the daily volume on a regular basis, how detrimental is that to, especially a young person's health?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, that's exactly it. Like some of these energy drinks that are like, 200 milligrams plus of caffeine per serving. And if someone's
Yeah.
having more than one serving a day, like that is huge amounts of caffeine for someone who is growing and developing and especially like, might be a smaller in a smaller body. So like that is like going to have an even bigger impact. So yeah, in terms of like the short term kind of effects of that, you would feel things like, that anxiety, racing heart, all of that kind of stuff. We know that some people, again, kind of like it kind of depends on genetics, but um, some people actually have an increased risk of things like heart attack with a higher caffeine intake. So there can be some really serious, like negative consequences as a result of consuming more than kind of the 300 milligrams of caffeine per day. So as a young person, like, do you want to be doing that when you're, growing and developing? And then it also can take the place of other nutrient rich foods and drinks and things like that. It can impact sleep, which we know is huge, especially for adolescents. So there's so many things that can kind of contribute to kind of the reasons why having that much caffeine is not a good idea for anyone, but especially for adolescents.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, because it feels like the sports drink industry is like trying to compete with, I'm going to give now the 220 grams of caffeine, and the next one's like, I'm going to give 250. It's like, it's a terrible negative cycle. um,
Yeah, it is. And the marketing is so good for a lot of
yeah.
these things that kids will just like, yeah, they don't, and yeah, they don't think about these things because they're teens and
Mm-hmm. 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 Um, Going back to what you were talking about in regards to pre-workouts, and so I want to kind of like jump off that. Wanted to ask, because I don't think we talked about this last time, like what are some of the supplements that you do think most people should consider adding to their regimen? I know supplements kind of get a bad rap, but I know there is a time and place for supplements. So I want, for
Sure.
the average sort of, we call them the weekend warrior, someone that hits the gym 4 to 5 times a week or 3 to 5 times a week, whether they're doing biking or running or whatever. What are some of the three supplements, kind of broad strokes, that you would kind of that people should consider?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, it's always hard to say because everyone, again, is so different and eats a different diet. But I was thinking kind of about the supplements that I most often recommend. So, number one would for sure be vitamin D, because we know that has a huge impact on many functions in the body, and most Canadians are deficient in, or at least have low levels of vitamin D. So, I usually recommend for active people and athletes, I'll often recommend even like 2,000 international units per day. Kind of the guidelines are to have about 1,000 international units per day as a supplement. But we do know that vitamin D plays a role in things like, muscle function and obviously bone health and injury recovery and prevention and things like that, immune function. So, just seeing, oftentimes people will get blood work done. Vitamin D isn't tested very like regularly, but I will often request that as a test and just to see where their levels are at. And most of the time, vitamin D levels come back low. So I think like 1,000 international units is the amount you need to maintain vitamin D levels. But if your levels are low, then you actually need more than that to bring them up in the first place. So that's one. Another one that I often recommend, kind of circling back to the fats, is omega 3 and omega 3 supplement. And the reason being is that most of us do not get enough omega 3s in our diet. So, in order to get enough omega 3, we really do need to be consuming fatty fish at least a couple times a week. Most people don't do that. And so, taking an omega 3 supplement can be a good way to, again, not get extra. Like if someone, let's say, has high triglyceride levels, which is a type of fat in the blood, we might recommend a higher dose of omega-3, because omega-3 has been shown to be really beneficial in bringing down triglyceride levels. But just for the average person who's healthy and active and all of those things, just to get kind of the daily recommended amount, oftentimes a supplement is necessary. So those two for sure. And then the third one, I was thinking, I don't routinely recommend this one, but when I do nutrient analysis on people's diets, I often see that their magnesium intake is low. And so we know magnesium plays a huge role in terms of like so many processes in the body, in terms of energy metabolism and muscle function and even heart health and all of these different things, and bone health. So oftentimes, even just until we can get their food intake up of magnesium, I will recommend a magnesium supplement as well.
Interesting. And is magnesium also used to help regulate sleep too?
It can be, yeah. So it can definitely be helpful for sleep. So oftentimes I'll recommend taking a magnesium supplement before bed. If you take it in too high of a dose, it can also have a laxative effect. So just an FYI warning there. So you don't want to like go full on with the magnesium the first day, but unless that's your purpose for taking it, but kind of like 100 to 150 milligrams before bed. I usually recommend it in the form of magnesium glycinate because that tends to be a bit easier in terms of GI side effects. But that's what I typically recommend.
I will say that was one of my purposes for taking it postpartum. So
yeah, totally. And it is effective for that. So if you need that, it's a good one to take.
yeah.
All right. I think we got we got two questions left. So I wanted to ask about hydration strategies, the importance of sort of electrolytes and the importance of sodium. I know salt and sodium intake has kind of been another sort of topic around nutrition these days in sports nutrition. I wanted to get your sense on sort of the types of strategies that you're kind of looking at for electrolytes and sodium. For obviously there's the endurance athlete that I think those things have really been talked about a lot, but I also know that's kind of now transferring to like more strength-based fitness and CrossFit and those types of other maybe shorter time domains.
Yeah. So I think with hydration in general, like if you're, for the average person, they don't need to supplement with electrolytes on top of like as part of their hydration strategy. Anytime we're looking at hydration from an exercise perspective, we're really looking at, what is being lost in sweat during exercise. And we know sodium is the primary electrolyte that's lost in sweat and can play a huge role even in like rehydration and muscle function and things like that. So getting some sodium and to a lesser extent potassium with your hydration, during a workout or before or after a workout is not a bad idea. But again, it depends kind of like how often you're working out, the length of your workout, how much you're sweating, like all of those sorts of things need to be taken into account as well. But it can definitely be helpful to include some sodium. And so typically looking at about 300 to 500 milligrams of sodium per 500 mils of fluids can be kind of a good amount to aim for sodium intake if you are looking at it strategically, kind of to replace losses from exercise.
How does someone know if they're like, how does someone know other than just like basically sweating? Like some people might say, oh, I sweated a lot today, but they maybe didn't. Like, how do you really know?
Right.
Is it just trial and error?
Yeah. So obviously, you can look at like how sweaty am I after a workout kind of thing, right? Sometimes what we'll do is wait before and after. And this is like a practice that we use in endurance sports a lot just to figure out hydration rates and things like that. But any weight that's lost during exercise, most of it will be water weight. And so that gives you a bit of a sense of like how much you're sweating. Typically, we don't want to lose more than about 1 or 2% of our body weight. during exercise from water losses. So if you do the math on that and look at like, am I sweating a lot more than that? Then yeah, maybe replacing some of the fluids with some electrolytes could be beneficial. But if you're within that range, then it's probably okay.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Cara, there's no way in terms of blood work or anything like that, in terms of hydration or sodium levels, or
It's hard with blood
I've
work.
always wondered. Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just very aware of the amount of sodium, obviously, because maybe this is a social thing too, but I'm always checking the labels and trying to stay under X amount for sodium and trying to keep that low. But I'm also very active and sweat a lot. And I always wonder, like, how can I tell if I potentially too low from a sodium intake perspective?
Yeah, and that's a great question because it is hard to know. And I think like that's even for myself too, I find that balance hard because we're like programmed into like low sodium, don't add salt to food, da da da, like
Hmm.
all this stuff, right? But then if you're very active, like I know for myself and a lot of my clients, like even like sometimes you get up too fast and you're dizzy, like that kind of stuff, or like some of that like orthostatic hypotension where it's like a low drop in blood pressure, like that can be a sign that like actually you probably do need a bit more sodium in your diet, or just checking your blood pressure, right? If it's low, if it's really low,
Hmm.
perhaps you do need some more salt in your diet. Salt is actually a mineral that is necessary, right? So we, again, the majority of people in North America consume way too much sodium and are
Right.
struggling with high blood pressure, right? But for people that are active and otherwise healthy, like sometimes we actually need to add a bit more salt into our diet. When we look at blood work, sodium and electrolytes in general are very well regulated in the blood. And so if we saw a decrease or increase in blood sodium levels, that would be cause for concern because like something else is going on. Sometimes we see that with like dehydration or overhydration, but it's really hard. Like most of the time your blood work will show normal electrolyte levels. And if it doesn't, then it's like, okay, like something's wrong here. That being said,
Hmm.
I did have a blood test done personally, and my sodium was a touch low in my blood, which I think may have been an overhydration issue. But so sometimes you do get those little like numbers that are out of range a little bit. But in general, it is hard to know kind of from a blood test if your sodium or potassium is low or high.
Cool. So more so feel or blood pressure, those sorts of
Yeah,
things.
totally.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think I'm rolling for the last question.
Okay.
Um, I've been I've been doing a lot of just listening and some podcasts and learning a little bit more about balancing blood sugars and insulin resistance, those sorts of things. I've been working with a few clients with PCOS, and that's one of the big things that we have to try and monitor. Um, to get into that, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about. I know we talk about um, carbohydrates for um, energy and for athletic performance. What are your thoughts on the intake of some of those carbohydrates, long-term health, how we can sort of manage um, all of that well?
Mm-hmm.
I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great question and, a challenging question too, because obviously there's, again, so many factors that play a role in that. I think from my own experience, I was a certified diabetes educator for a number of years and worked in many different hospital clinics and community-based
Oh,
programs and
cool.
stuff like that. So I've worked with many people that have PCOS, diabetes, prediabetes, gestational diabetes. And just something that I have often seen is, people get diagnosed with something and are like super, super motivated and make many changes almost to an extreme and then are unable to sustain it. Right. And then we kind of see this rebound happening. whether that's a rebound weight gain or rebound of like eating habits or whatever. And we know that that then actually makes the insulin resistance oftentimes worse, right? And so when I see someone that's really motivated to make changes, I love that and I want to work with them around that. But you also want to make it as sustainable as possible, right? And so
Yeah.
again, that comes from a place of like not um not feeling like you have to micromanage, like even things like checking blood sugars or this trend of like continuous blood glucose monitoring in people that don't have diabetes. Like to me that doesn't really make sense because it's like
It's
blood
intense.
sugars, you know, vary throughout the day naturally. And if you're always looking at like, oh, now it's high, now it's low, now it's like you're going to drive yourself crazy, right? And it's actually all part of like a normal blood sugar profile. If you don't have diabetes, right? If you have diabetes or PCOS, then sometimes you do see these ups and downs. And so, yeah, I think a lot of a lot of that balance is looking at not, and it's interesting actually, because a lot of the studies that have been done around low carbohydrate diets versus other types of diets for the management or even remission, like putting diabetes into remission, show that there's not really much of a difference with low carbohydrate diets in terms of outcomes, right? So it does in theoretically, again, when we think about cut carbs, we don't have that insulin response. That's the answer, right? And for some people, that is a sustainable way to eat, and that's fine. But it's not necessarily the answer for everyone. It's not that simplistic, right? Like we're kind of led to believe that it's like, you know, carbohydrates, pancreas releases insulin. We have all this circulating insulin, and that's leading to increased fat storage and, you know, all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. And that's a piece of it for sure. But when we look at PCOS or diabetes or prediabetes, there's so many, like it's a hormone imbalance thing, right? So we have the liver producing more glucose. We have the pancreas maybe not producing as much insulin, sometimes overproducing insulin. So there's all these things going on. And so to say like just cut out carbs is usually not the answer because first of all, it's not sustainable, but also there's not a lot of research that that's actually going to be helpful. So we do have to look at, okay, let's manage blood sugars, right? We can do that with things like protein, fiber,
Mm-hmm.
fat, right? Like adding those things to meals and snacks, lots of plant-based foods, right? Vegetables, you know, some
Yeah.
fruit, all of that stuff. But it's, to me, and I think we talked about this last time on the podcast, it's about what can we add, right? Like, let's not think about restriction and taking away because that automatically often leads to us just wanting that thing even more, right? So we can
Yeah.
do like no carb or low carb for a period of time. And then physiologically, we're just driven towards wanting to eat carbs. And then it's like this whole up and down of like restriction binge. And we know when we do that multiple times, we end up in a place where usually our weight is higher. Usually we have more insulin resistance. Usually we're at higher risk of chronic disease. And so sometimes those good intentions of making those significant changes actually lead us to a place that's less healthy. So if we can start with, okay, what can I add to my diet, right? What is going to make me feel good, balance my energy, but also balance my blood sugars, then usually you can get to a place that is a bit more sustainable in terms of what you can maintain.
Cool. I love that. So the glucose goddess that I've been following, she has some decent tips around that. So actually, it was a decent follow. So hey,
Yeah.
that's
And again, like
good.
it was good to like see all these like and I've seen Glucose Goddess, but I haven't like really looked into her
Mhm.
stuff. But a lot of the things she's recommending, I mean, some of it is maybe a little more out there and not so much based on research
Agreed.
yet.
Agreed.
But I think a lot of the stuff she recommends, like protein with meals, fat with meals,
Hmm.
you know, all of those
Right.
things are like, yeah, like that's what we've been telling people with diabetes for years, right? Like that makes
Yeah.
sense for sure. Go for a walk after a meal. Yes, like that will help your body utilize sugar and carbohydrates better. And make your cells more sensitive to insulin. So, like, all of those things are like practical things that people can do. And it's not from a restriction perspective, but it's more of like, what can I just add to what I'm already doing
Yeah.
to help my body better utilize this carbohydrate? And I think, yeah, there's
Love it.
definitely nothing wrong with that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, yeah,
I
this
think
is.
that was
I was
it.
going to say thank you so much. This has been. I've actually learned a lot in such 30 minutes. It's been. I love how you. I love how you explain things and you give the science behind them. We all know we're not trying to say social media is the right answer, but we all know social media, they have to play the game to get the attention. So I'm here for the practical advice. You just got to listen to a podcast. You can't just
And
come.
Cara does have some really good practical advice on Instagram too. So if you aren't
Yes,
following her, give her a follow
Thank you.
at,
Yeah, thanks.
at
absolutely.
Blueprint Nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah, at Blueprint
Yeah.
Nutrition Sport. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll share those in the show notes as well. Thank you again. We're going to make this a routine thing too, for sure, because I love having your opinion on the show.
Yes,
So
I
thank
think
you so
we
much.
have one maybe coming up at the end of the summer regarding maybe some kids nutrition. So I'm super excited to
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think that'll be great.
Hmm.
Good stuff.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Cara.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you.